Let's explore my racism slash sexism. And I find it interesting that those accusing me of racism are the ones who are being accused by others of sexism. I've been accused of both. And since I don't give a shit, since it doesn't affect my opinion whatsoever, what other people label me as, I will accept both labels. I know that people are indoctrinated within a moral and cultural system which teaches them to dismiss ideas without exploring them first, without considering them carefully when they insult them. Now, this presupposes that the world is a benevolent place and that nothing insulting could be said about anybody, or that an idea, in order to be valid, has to flatter us, has to make us feel good, or has to adhere to a social norm. Now, I will say up front that all my ideas also apply to me. I am not excluded from my ideas. Yet, even though some of them are unflattering to me, I accept them as valid because I choose to think outside my emotions and my self-interests. Now let's return to this racism accusation. Accusing me of racism is valid. Do I believe racism exists? Yes. The same way I believe sexism exists. Do I believe that because somebody is of a different race they should be violated, that violence should be done upon them? No. No more than I would say that accepting or saying that their species would indicate that I'm proposing that violence should be done upon other species. Do I think that race determines limits such as height, weight, intelligence, appearance? Yes, because we are the sum of our past. That is, our bloodlines determine our limits, and race is only an indication of a shared historical bloodline, where in some period in the past, a period of genetic isolation, this is how different species evolved, by the way, through genetic isolation, had occurred. Did this genetic isolation suffice to split the human race into different subspecies? No. But it did suffice to produce a divergence in qualities, not only apparent qualities, because appearance is not superficial, like some libertarians and humanists and retards would like to think. I don't believe beauty is skin deep either. Does this mean that I consider myself attractive? No. Yet, I cannot convince myself to lie to myself simply because it does not flatter me. So beauty, yes, is an indication of genetic health. And this is why humans develop the capacity to perceive and to appreciate beauty. Beauty is, in fact, a manifestation of symmetry. And what is symmetry? Order. And in a universe falling towards disorder or entropy, order is an attractive element. Another word for order is power. Another word for symmetry and order is intelligence. That is, what for the physical is beauty, it's called beauty. In the mental context, it's called intelligence. Now, beauty is a manifestation of the past. That means of a genetic prowess in the past, passed on to an offspring. And this is not always an indication of mental symmetry. That is, beauty, external beauty, does not always coincide with mental beauty, intelligence. Why? Because the success of the past creates a stagnation. Because beauty is power by itself, the mind does not have to develop in relation to the environment, because it doesn't face as many challenges as somebody else who is not as beautiful, for example. Now back to race. Race is a manifestation of the past. Do I advocate violence towards any particular race? No. Do I separate the races just using pigmentations? No. Do I think that races should be kept slaves or such things? No. But I cannot admit or tell myself or convince myself, just because the social milieu forces me to, that races are insignificant, or that the appearance of a difference in form, in yes, pigmentation, in hair, in appearance is accidental or irrelevant. What a race is a, like I said, a product of past genetic isolation, which produces limits. For instance, some races have a limit on how tall they can be. Other races have a limit on how strong they can be. Other races on how intelligent they can be. Now, does that mean that everybody within a race has that characteristic? No. I would say that men have more capacity to be abstract thinkers and are more intelligent than females. But this does not mean that I think that all men are automatically to be considered more intelligent than all females. In fact, I've met many females who are far more intelligent than the average male. That's why I don't believe in this MRA bullshit where everybody who has testicles is automatically somebody I should care about, because they might kill themselves in a world that's populated by 7 billion people, and where every moron can now have a child. But of course, the usual method of dismissing a concept, other than the emotional factor, is to accuse it of an emotion. That is, feminists or humanists might say that a man who thinks that women are inferior to men intellectually or even physically is a sexist. This automatically implies that he's either advocating violence upon women, or that all men are automatically superior to all women. And this is an easy way of just dismissing an opinion without actually considering it. The same thing goes for racism, or the racist accusation. Now, I admit there's many simpleton racists out there, but I also think that there's many simpleton feminists and humanists and MRAs. In fact, most of them are simpletons and have no capacity to think above a certain level of self-interested bullshit. So yes, if the accusation of sexist or racist means that I acknowledge that there's a difference between the sexes, or there's a difference between the races, then I am that, and nothing else besides. Because like I said, your bloodline and your gender determines your potential in all areas. Now, we live in a world of globalized economics where much race mixing has already occurred, so the distinctive traits of each race have been blurred somewhat, and yet we can see them just by studying history, by studying where civilizations came to be and where they never developed above a certain level. Why, for example, is Europe such a bedrock for the emergence of very sophisticated civilizations, whereas in the sub-Saharan mainland of Africa, there is no such civilization emerging, except for some Zulu and some primitive in Eritrea, which can be explained also by the communication via the Nile between the upper Nile and the lower Nile, where the upper Nile was rehabitated by tribes that had exited Africa, violently exited Africa due to competition, that much dreaded word. Now, the basic premise here is that stress creates the necessity for growth. That is, the mother of all invention is need. Where there's no need, there's no growth, there's stagnation. So the tribes that remained back in Africa didn't have to evolve. They weren't stressed enough. Whereas the tribes that were forced out of Africa at some point were forced to adapt to different environments. Some of them, such as the Proto-Europeans, the ancestors of the Caucasian race, almost reached extinction. It is said that a couple of thousand existed at some point due to the Ice Age and to the pressures this forced upon them. Now this meant that the brightest of the bright managed to survive, and this brightness was passed on to their ancestors. In fact, Mencken goes as far as to, using the same line of thought, to explain the Renaissance as the product of the Black Plague. That is, Europe was decimated by the Black Plague, meaning that only the brightest of the bright could survive. This also explains why Ashkenazi Jews dominate today, because of the Holocaust. The brightest of the bright, such as Freud, being taken out of Europe when his life was under threat. The brightest of the bright survived and passed on their genes, whereas the rabble did not. We also see here the cleansing effect culling has upon a herd, upon a population, and how sheltering, by eliminating the severity of culling, actually promotes weakness within the herd. And we see it in the Western systems, where decades, if not centuries, of sheltering are now culminating in a effete, weak, slavish, degraded type of man, and a man who now can only bitch and complain and ask for help from the authorities to maintain itself alive. And this is what the absence of culling results in, and the absence of stress. In order to grow a muscle, you have to stress it. When you don't stress it, the muscle atrophies, becomes weak, degenerates. Therefore, and in closing, not wanting to get any more into this, since I've dealt with the subject in other areas, in other forums, calling me a racist, to dismiss me, is tantamount to calling any of the MRAs sexist, or calling feminists sexist and dismissing them, or calling communists communists and dismissing them. It doesn't really say anything. It simply uses a Pavlovian response, because certain words have been imbued with a certain evilness, certain weight, historical weight, where the mere mention of them makes us cringe or forces us to react in a particular way. For instance, when we hear Hitler or Nazi or skinhead or discrimination, the word, or empathy or intolerance or sexism or racism, we automatically have a response. We don't even need to hear anything else. We just can dismiss something just by labeling it. In the States, for instance, the mere term liberal is enough to dismiss an entire line of thought without even going into it. And it's usually done by the most simplistic minds that have no idea what is going on or what is being said, but have been trained, have been taught this defensive mechanism. Say something to a Christian about God, and what will he say? The same shit, the automatic response that he's been given by his preacher, accusing them of others of hating God or of being evil or whatever. It's an automatic response to a stimulation, a Pavlovian response. For instance, say Nazi, automatically what comes into your mind? Total dismissal. You don't even have to consider it. Racism, automatic response. Sexism, up until now, and amongst the vast population, just say anything negative about females or males, automatically sexism comes about. No capacity to argue, to consider, to think. An automatic response, automated response, trained into automatons